Hey guys, Mr. Cooney here, and we are picking up with book 21 of the Odyssey. It's called The Test of the Bow. So I'm going to zoom in here. And here we go. Okay, so we start off with a little paraphrase section in books 18 through 20, which we don't read directly. Odysseus observes the suitors and finds out. Remember, the suitors are the guy who have been camping out, trying to marry Penelope and abusing the place and conspiring against Telemachus, right? He observes the traders and finds that two in particular, Antinous, not to be confused with Alcinous, who is the king to whom Odysseus was telling the first half of the story, and Eurymachus, are rude and demanding. Penelope asks Odysseus the beggar for news of her husband. In other words, Penelope, of course, doesn't understand that the disguised beggar who's just kind of trying to figure things out is actually Odysseus. He says that he has heard that Odysseus is on his way home. Penelope, however, has given up hope for Odysseus' return, and she proposes an archery contest to the suitors with marriage to her as the prize. As you can imagine, it's going to be pretty hard, right? She enters the storeroom and takes down the heavy bow that Odysseus had left behind. Now the queen, into the real text here, now the queen reached the storeroom and halted. Here was an oaken sill cut long ago and sanded clean and bedded true. Foursquare the door jambs and the shining doors were set by the careful builder, Odysseus, right? Penelope untied the strap around the curved handle, pushed her hook into the slit, aimed at the bolts inside, and shot them back. Then came a rasping sound as those bright doors, the key sprung, had give way. A bellow like a bull's vaunt in a meadow, very simile there, followed by her light footfall entering the plank floor. Herb-scented robes lay in chests, but the lady's milk-white arms went up to lift the bow down from a peg in its own polished bow case. So all the details there are basically to kind of not only create suspense, right, and take out the sacred object of Odysseus's bow, which has been talked about before, right, but also the craftsmanship and the care and the skill that Odysseus would have in building such things, right? Moving on to the next paragraph. Now Penelope sank down, holding the weapon on her knees, and drew her husband's great bow out, and sobbed and bit her lip and let the salt tears flow. You got to remember, she thinks he's dead, right? And this is her kind of letting go. Then back she went to face the crowded hall, tremendous bow in hand, and on the shoulder hung the quiver spiked with coughing death. Behind her, maids bore a basket full of axe heads, bronze, and iron implements for the master's game. Thus, in her beauty, she approached the suitors, and near a pillar of the solid roof, going on to the next page, she paused, her shining veil across her cheeks, her maids on either hand still, and then spoke to the banqueters. My lords, hear me. Suitors, indeed, you have commandeered this house to feast and drink in, day and night, my husband being long gone, long out of mind. You found no justification for yourselves, none except your lust to marry me. Stand up then. We now declare a contest for that prize for me, right? Here is my lord Odysseus's hunting bow. Bend and string it if you can. Who sends an arrow through iron X-helve sockets, 12 in line? Who can do that? I join my life with his, and I leave this place, my home, my rich and beautiful bridal house, forever to be remembered, though I dream it only. Okay, so somebody has to shoot an arrow through 12 axe heads, so like the hole where the handle would go, right? Despite heating and greasing the bow, the lesser suitors prove unable to, they can't even string his bow. You got to like bend it down and put the loop over it. The most able suitors, the strongest, Antinous and Eurymachus, hold off. While the suitors are busy with the bow, Odysseus, still disguised as a beggar, goes to enlist the aid of his two trusted servants, Eumaeus the swineherd and Philoetius the cowherd. Two men had meanwhile left the hall, swineherd and cowherd, in companionship, one downcast as the other. But Odysseus followed them outdoors, outside the court, and coming up, said gently, "You, herdsman, and you too, swineherd, I could say a thing or two, or should I keep it dark? No, no, speak. My heart tells me. Would you be men enough, to stand by Odysseus if he came back?" They still don't know who he is. "Suppose he dropped out of a clear sky, as I did. Suppose some god should bring him. Would you bear arms for him, or for the suitors?" And the cowherd says, "Let the master come. Father Zeus, grant our old wish. Some courier guide him back, then judge what stuff is in me and how I manage arms." Okay, so they're showing that they have been loyal servants. They're not taking advantage of and enjoying the presence of the suitors. They would side with Odysseus even if they are outnumbered, it sounds like, right? Next page. Likewise, Eumaeus fell to praying all to heaven for his return, so that Odysseus, sure at least of these two guys, told him, I am at home, for I am he. I bore adversities, but in the 20th year I am ashore in my own land. I find the two of you alone among my people, longing for my coming. Prayers I never heard except your own, that I might come again. So now what is in store for you, I'll tell you. If Zeus brings down the suitors by my hand, I promise marriages to both, and cattle and houses built near mine, and you shall be brothers in arms of my Telemachus. Here, let me show you something else, the sign that I am he, that you can trust me. Look, this old scar from the tusk wound that I got boar hunting on Parnassus. So he promises to elevate their station in life if they will stick with him like they claim to do. Okay, moving on, line 74. Shifting his rags, he bared the long gash, and both men looked and knew, and threw their arms around the old soldier, weeping, kissing his head and shoulders. He as well took each man's hand and hands to kiss, and then said, to cut it short, else they should weep till dark, break off, no more of this. Anyone at the door could see and tell them. Drift back in, like go back in amongst the suitors, but separately at intervals after me. Now listen to your orders. When the time comes, those gentlemen to a man will be dead against giving me bow or quiver. Like they're not going to want to give me, this old beggar, the bow that they're unable to string, right? Defy them. Eumaeus, bring the bow and put it in my hands there at the door. Tell the women to lock their own door tight. Tell them if someone hears the shock of arms or groans of men in hall or court, not one must show her face, but keep still at her weaving. Philodius, run to the outer gate and lock it. Throw the crossbar and lash it. Okay, so Odysseus says, let them in on his plan and his identity. And he's telling them, bring me the bow, and then we're going to take care of business and keep the women out. Old gender roles, right? Okay, next page. Little paraphrasing here. Odysseus the beggar asks the suitors if he might try the bow. Worried the old man may show them up, they refuse, but Penelope urges them to let Odysseus try. At Telemachus' request, Penelope leaves the men to settle the question of the bow among themselves. Two trusted servants lock the doors of the room as they are instructed, and Telemachus orders the bow be given to Odysseus. Below the picture here, and Odysseus took his time, turning the bow, tapping it every inch for borings the termites might have made while the master of the weapon was abroad. The suitors were now watching him, and some jested among themselves. A bow lover, a dealer on old bows. Maybe he has one like it at home, or has an itch to make one for himself. See how he handles it, the sly old buzzard. One disdainful suitor added that, may his fortune grow an inch for every inch he bends it. So they're laughing at him, thinking, of course, that he won't be able to string it, let alone pull the stunt of shooting that arrow through those 12 axe heads. But the man skilled in all ways of contending, there's that epithet that keeps coming back over and over again, skilled in all ways of contending, like he's good at everything, right? Satisfied by the great bow's look and heft, like a musician, like a harper, epic similes there, when the quiet hand upon his instrument draws between his thumb and forefinger a sweet new string upon a peg, so effortlessly Odysseus, in one motion, strung the bow, then slid his right hand down the cord and plucked it so the taut gut vibrated, hummed, and sang a swallow's note. Now, obviously, the suitors are going to be shocked, right? How did this old beggar do that? In the hushed hall, it smote the suitors, and all their faces changed. Then Zeus thundered overhead, apparently on Odysseus' side now, right? One loud crack for a sign, and Odysseus laughed within him that the son of crooked-minded Cronus had flung that omen down. He picked one ready arrow from his table where it lay bare. The rest were waiting still in the quiver for the young man's turn to come. He knocked it, let it rest across the hand grip, drew the string, and grooved the butt of the arrow, aiming where he sat upon the stool. All the suitors are, of course, like, oh, he's not going to be able to do this, right? Then quietly, Odysseus said, Telemachus, the stranger you welcomed in your hall has not disgraced you. I did not miss. Sorry. Now flashed the arrow. I skipped that section there. From the twanging bow, as clean as a whistle, through every socket rang, grazed not one, to thud with heavy brazen head beyond. So he does it, of course, right? It's Odysseus. He shoots the arrow through the axe heads. Now all the suitors are really in shock. Then quietly, Odysseus says, Telemachus, the stranger you welcomed in your hall has not disgraced you. I did not miss, neither did I take all day stringing the bow like these guys. My hand and eye are sound, not so contemptible as the young men say. The hour has come to cook their lordship's mutton, supper by daylight, other amusements later with song and harping that adorn a feast. He dropped his eyes and nodded, and the prince Telemachus, the true son of Odysseus, belted his sword on, clapped his hand to his spear, and with a clink and glitter of keen bronze stood by his chair in the forefront near his father. And that is the end of the test of the great bow. And as you can guess, some violence is about to happen. And we'll leave it off from there. I'll be back for book 22.